All right. Here, I should make sure I got my audio going through the right one here. How's it going, Mike?
Good. How are you? Can you hear me all right?
All right. Test 1 2. Test 1 2.
Yo.
Oh yeah, that's way better.
Interestingly, I think your other mic sounded better.
Yeah. Do you want me to use the computer mic?
Yeah, probably. They probably sound better because the Bluetooth, I think, is messing your signal up a little bit. But usually it's good. It's good to use the Bluetooth earphones to hear and then talk through the mic.
Okay. Do you want me to keep those on? Okay.
Yeah. So that way there's no audio feedback loop, and it just makes sure the audio is really cool for the podcast.
Sounds good. All right. So they're using computer, and then I should be able to hear you now.
You sound good.
All right.
Yeah, you sound good.
Awesome, man. Yeah, I was looking forward to this. Funny enough, when I had initially joined you guys and I saw you doing a lot of and this is a little bit different, but when you guys were doing all the sales rep interviews, it was one of my goals to be like, I'm going to be on one of those interviews one day.
Heck yeah. Well, we're here. We made it. So good work. All right. So what I'll do is I'll give you just like a little preface and then we'll jump in so you kind of have a feel for how it rolls.
Sure.
So usually how we'll do it is about 45 minutes to an hour is usually how long it will roll. The main things that we'll talk about and like that I'll want to explore with you is just your journey coming into the space. And at each point, especially you've made what you feel like is a quantum leap in your career or like in your mentality and how you look at things. What were those moments of the evolution? And like, what were the challenges? What were the breakthroughs? How did it all happen? And then we'll just talk about like the industry at large and what we see and whatnot. And so it's pretty free flowing. If you want to go on any tangents, we're happy to explore any tangents. If there's any questions that you want to ask, feel free to ask. So the goal is just that it's like super organic, really natural, free flowing. So I don't have any like predetermined questions that I'm going to be following. I'm just going to be kind of following my intuition and invite you to do the same. And something cool usually comes out of it. So.
All right. Sounds good.
Sweet. All right. We will get rocking. What's up, everybody? We are
sorry.
What is up, everybody? We're back for another episode of the Scale Your Sales podcast. And this time I am joined by Matt. Matt, I'm super grateful to have you. So to give you guys a little bit of backstory on Matt, he is a really young guy who came into the space about, 2 years ago that you came into high ticket sales?
Yep. Bought my first course it was like 2020, end of 2020, 2021. Yeah. Cool.
And then, so from that point now, what Matt's been able to do in a really short period of time is remarkable, especially at his age. He's been able to move through, he went through several orgs, learned a lot, got really good as a setter, and he's now moved to where he's SDR manager. So he's managing a team of setters and he's helping coach them, ramp them, get them into KPI. And then he's earning overrides on their production and he's incentivized to help keep pushing them in their performance. And one thing I'm especially happy to have you for here, Matt, is that I know you've been doing a podcast about something similar, just being an SDR, what it is to be an SDR and all that. And I've said this a ton of times myself. I'm a big believer that the SDR is one of the most misunderstood roles inside of the business. And it's one of the roles that it's sometimes can be thankless. It sometimes can be a little bit unglorified, but it's really critical to make sure that the whole team's functioning properly and really great setters do have a place, and it's as important as a really great closer. So I think it's important that we have that conversation. And as well, for a lot of business owners who maybe haven't had setters or are looking at getting setters, I definitely want us to be able to help them understand what it takes to do this, as well as for any reps, anybody that's looking to potentially transition in a remote high ticket sales, what it takes to become a setter, why you've chosen to go the route set manager instead of closer. I think there's a lot of really interesting things in your story. So with that said, I'm super grateful to have you here, and I'm excited to dive in.
Yeah. Appreciate that introduction a ton, Mike. And I mean, just for a little bit of background and context on kind of where I even came from. So I didn't have any business background. I didn't really have any kind of career prior to diving into this. So 2 years ago, I bought this course just like through an ad. A lot of people get sucked into the space that way. Spent about 4 months bouncing between different offers. A lot of people don't know, but I was actually fired like 3-4 different times as I was getting started, just trying to figure things out. And then finally, I actually got connected with one of your, I guess I would say just like people that worked with your organization. Got placed with my current company, REI Game Changers, and started off as an SDR, and then took about, I would say, a year and 2 months, and then I moved into the SDR management role. So yeah, it's been a wild ride for sure.
So there's one story you told me that I would love for you to share with anyone here. What happened on, I think it was your first SDR job, or the first time you ever had an SDR job? What happened with that story?
Oh, yeah. So basically what happened was it's the first job I'd ever had. I was just trying to figure things out. Mindset completely screwed up. So I hopped on an interview, and I did like fairly well on the interview. At least that's what they had thought, because I'd done a couple of them at that point. But I had no clue how to manage the pressure of making calls or anything like that. And so I was about 3-4 days in, and I was making like 30 dials a day, because I'd get to the end of the day and I would just be so stressed from making calls that I couldn't even function. And so, I wasn't thinking straight. Nothing was really happening. So after a 2-day weekend, I was like, you know what? I'm 1099 contractor. I get to choose when I, come to work anyways. Message the boss is like, hey, I'm not going to be able to make it in on Monday. Bam. And the reason I sent that message is because I was still so stressed from just like making dials and doing all of that. So I went off into the forest, and I was just like laying down in the snow, contemplating, everything that had been happening over the last couple of days. Came back, and that was the first time that I was fired, when you found out what had happened there.
Yep. I love that story because of it's so real, and it's just, now you pick up the phone and you'll dial and talk to anybody like a pro, and it's nothing, right? And so your transformation in just a short period of time, it's like crazy. And so a question I have for you is, going from that feeling of like, oh my God, the ultimate level of anxiety of like, I'm picking up this phone, what am I doing? To now where you're at, where you're able to do dials to the point you do 100, 150 dials in a day like it's nothing, and you're able to train other people how to do it. What has that done for you?
Yeah, I would say it was definitely life-changing. What's funny is when I first got into the space, I wasn't really good with people. I wouldn't say I didn't have skills. I didn't really have, even really confidence. Like a lot of those fundamental soft skills I truly did lack. Really, the only thing I did lack or didn't lack was grit. And so that's really basically all it was as far as getting to where I am. I actually don't think I really had anything unique other than I could just deal with more crap than most other people. But yeah, a lot of it was just, sometimes you got to get fired a couple of times. I think a lot of people come to the industry and they think like, I'm just going to land a gig. It's going to take 30 days. I'm going to hit the ground running. But the reality is, if you don't have a sales background, sometimes the best thing that can happen to you is to get fired a couple of times, figure out how to onboard into companies.
Yeah.
Like legitimately, yeah, it's been life-changing. Like I'm at a point now where I can basically travel year round. Financially, I'm in a place where I can do most things that I want as a single guy. I was in Playa del Carmen just last month for 10 days. I'm likely going to be going back down towards the end of the month here and just living there. So it's been a complete game changer for sure.
You maybe you've heard me say this. I don't know if you have or not, but so for me, one of the things that really changed my life was when I read The 4 Hour Work Week, and there is this one sentence in the book where he says, fun things happen when you get paid in dollars, your business expenses are in pesos, and you're living on rupees, or your business expenses are rupees and you're living on pesos. And so now you've gotten a taste of that in Playa del Carmen. How was your experience? Was that your first time out of Canada?
No, so I've been out of Canada, but it was mostly just road trips down into the States, which United States and Canada, as far as if you're traveling, are fairly similar, I would say, depending on the season, of course. It's a little bit colder in the winter. But no, Playa del Carmen was really, really cool. I think the biggest difference is I'm out in the country, and like one of the biggest things in like my life right now as a young guy is like it's super isolating living out in the country. And I think Canada in general, like even if you're in the city, like it's generally a lot more quiet. I'm outside of Ottawa, very, very quiet government town. And it was popping in Playa. It is a true party city. If any of you want to go, like the nightlife is incredible there. So I would say that would be like the most stark difference that I realized. And I think overall, just people are having a lot more fun down there than up here in the cold.
Yeah. Did you find yourself getting in? I always think it's interesting when people do get the freedom they start traveling. Like everybody has their own little ways of traveling. So like, what was the thing for you? Did you find yourself mostly hanging out with expats? Were you more like, I want to go hang out with the locals? Like, what was your sort of vibe down there?
Yeah. So for me, I kind of wanted just to talk with everyone. Definitely part of the reason I wanted to go down there is because I heard there were more digital nomads. Honestly, I didn't really have a lot of time to go out and find them. I spoke with a lot of tourists. Funny enough, I ended up having more conversations in French than I did in Spanish down there, which was interesting. Yeah, because there's a lot of tourists from France, and I had some good conversations. Yeah, we chatted with the locals. There's a couple times where we went out in the evening, and that's the thing that's great about Playa. Like you sit down at a table. Usually in most, I feel, North American places, you don't just start having a conversation with the person next to you. But at least down there, it's just supernatural. You just start talking with people. Hey, like, where are you from? Most people there are travelers anyways. And I connected with more people there in that 10-day period than I had the entire previous year.
Yeah. And that's one of those things too, is like you're connecting with a lot of people too who are traveling and whatnot. So especially when you start to find like where the digital nomad communities are, you can plug in and like your network just grows so fast, and you can start to meet people who are doing cool things, and who knows, maybe nothing happens out of it, but then 2-3 years down the road, they bring you into a project and it ends up being a cool match made in heaven. So it's really cool. And now you've realized that winter is optional. So it's a choice, right? It's a choice that you're making. You could be in Florida like this right now, but or you could be in Playa. You could be anywhere. So now all right, I don't have to deal with this Canadian winter anymore.
I'll tell you what, though, one of the most profound things that I had realized, and I think a lot of people don't realize this in the space, like as far as sales reps go, is so I was able to make an in-person connection with my CEO for the first time whilst I was down there. And about a dozen of our clients, there's a business event. And I would say like, you don't really know the business that you're working with until you've actually met some of the people in person.
Sure. Big time. Yeah, that's how weird is it?
That was super surprising for me because there were certain things, even with the way that I interacted with my CEO on calls, like we're still at a stage where I'm doing a lot of communication with him. There's just so many things that all of a sudden I started understanding with regarding to like just kind of how he was, things that he wanted. And in that 2-hour dinner, because we just ended up going out for dinner, you end up learning more about the person than you do across like a whole year's worth of one-to-ones. It's really crazy. And so we started talking about having more of like an in-person office, but I just think a lot of virtual reps don't realize like, hey, it might actually be to your benefit to actually go and be in an in-person office. I think it's way, way better, to be honest. The only advantage that we have as being virtual is that we get to travel pretty much anywhere we want, which is pretty good one. But it's tough as far as community, for sure.
Yeah. And one thing I would say there's a lot of orgs too that will do quarterly events, or they'll do like retreats with the team. And that's another way that you could stay remote, but you can still get some of that. But I 100% agree. Like once you kind of get in that same room, you get that, like that old saying, right? You never really know someone until you get to travel with them. So that sort of feeling, like when you get there, you're in person, you're at a resort, you're able to go to dinner, you're able to, you order a car to go to this place, and you just see how they interact with people. Like even for me, like there was an offer that I was on where once I got like that, one of the founders was just so rude to basic people that I just quit at that. Like I was like, fuck that person. You know what I mean? Like I don't have any respect for them anymore at all, because the way that they would talk about the waiters, or the way that they would talk about, the hostess, or they would treat their assistants and like treat kind of like lower level people. It was one of those things, like I've always believed that, if you want to see who someone really is, see how they treat people who can't do anything for them. And like the person was such a douchebag to these people that it just, even Adriana, my wife, she was with me. She was like, why are they talking to people like that? Like it didn't make sense to her, and it didn't make sense to me. It was just so outside of our values, and it was so outside of what they said they would do when they were on the internet. And they like, I was drinking the Kool-Aid, and then when I was behind the curtain, I was like, fuck you. You know what I mean? Like, fuck you. I don't want anything to do with you. And so it's cool when you can see that, and then, or you see how epic the person is, and like, or their little tiny nuances in the way that they're particular about certain things. You could pick up on those peculiarities, and then you start to accommodate or adapt your work style to be a lot better with them. So that's a huge distinction. And then, so I guess, I know obviously you mentioned grit and fire. You said you got fired 3 or 4 times in the process. Like most people would quit at that point. What made you be crazy enough to keep trying?
Yeah. So honestly, it was kind of one of those decisions that I made from the get-go. About 3 weeks after purchasing that initial course, I ended up rolling myself into one of those high ticket programs. And just so y'all know, like I was one of those people where they had to have that 3-hour conversation that's to overcome all like the objections, all the mindset obstacles. But when I went into that, and it was intentional in part, like I wanted to put my back to the wall to where like I had to succeed, but I invested more money than what I had. And so by the time I actually got with my current company and started succeeding, I actually had a negative balance in my bank. And so there really wasn't any other option. Yeah, like I truly had to figure out a way to make money with it. But there was just thousands of intro videos sent out. And there was plenty of times, like 3, 4 times where it was like, this isn't even worth it. I'd rather quit. But I just didn't really have that option. And so as a young guy, like I had my basic needs covered for, living at home, things like that. And so I was able to take a risk like that. And I think it paid off extremely well.
Yeah, I would say so. And it's interesting with that situation. Did you feel like there's obviously a lot of programs out there that have been popping up to say, hey, why don't you become a remote sales rep? Or they're selling the dream of being, especially I think it's more like high ticket closer or inbound closer, remote closer. The closer identity is what I see get sold more frequently. In coming into that program, and then coming out of the program, did you feel like you get what you got what you expected, or like what did you feel through that process?
No, not at all. Because so here's what happens, right? Is I think a lot of people get into the space, and I would say like if you want to be a remote worker and you want to make it in this space, which I think is more competitive than what people think, you need to be better than what a lot of people think initially.
Yeah,
but their high level promise was, you're going to become a high ticket closer, make 10K a month within 30 days. That didn't happen. So I did not get the result that they had promised. And to be honest, I didn't really learn one of the really fundamental things, which is how do you network with other companies? Like, how do you go about those interviews? How do you onboard yourself? How do you become a really great appointment setter? A lot of what I think a lot of programs push is just starting off as an inbound closer or whatever it is. And there's another fellow in the space, Daniel Yamas, who was the one who had to convince me to start off as an appointment setter. And I would say that's honestly like the best decision I ever made. I was saying like, hey, I could just start off as an inbound closer. I don't need to do this appointment setting thing. Seems a little bit like a pain. I don't know why I would do that. It's easier to just become a closer. And that is just absolutely not true. It is much, much easier and better and more profitable to start off as an appointment setter inside of a good company to where you can move up to the close role in later days or management or whatever it is you want. So yeah,
Why?
there's
What
definitely
makes you
some
say
big
that?
lessons learned.
What makes you say that? Why was the like? I want to understand why.
Well, because you suck. If you're like new to the industry and you don't have sales experience, if you have sales experience, you could potentially do it. But if you're somebody like me who's coming from literally no skills, then you can't close. I mean, maybe if you're on a really low level B2C where you're selling a course like under 5K, you could pull it. But if you want to be part of an org where,
Even then,
and
it's
Mike's
probably
like, no,
hard.
not even.
Yeah, even then
Yeah.
it's probably harder, dude. I think
So
sometimes those are harder than what you guys are selling at your price points and stuff because you're dealing with more sophisticated audiences. So the sale is easier. The product knowledge barrier is higher with what you guys do, though. So that's where the gap is. But yeah, sometimes even those low level courses are harder because you got to be able to like really do Jedi mind tricks to get people past their own bullshit.
Yeah. I would say one big thing I've learned, and this is a bit of a tangent, but if you're a rep, get into a company with a really good organic social presence for real. I
Interesting.
think one of the biggest mistakes that I had made is when I was looking at companies, and honestly, like in our current company, it's something that we're still sorting out is, hey, how do we get a better organic presence? So we're working on it actively this year and we'll get there for sure. But I know a lot of people who have companies where their skill set is no joke. Like I actually think I'm 5 to 10 times more skilled than some reps in other companies on the appointment setting side, like as an SDR manager and things like that. But they do like 2, 3 times the revenue as us just because everybody knows about them and their social presence is just so strong. And so as far as, hey, how easy is the sale? It's like if you get onto a company with a really strong social presence, sometimes your sales skills don't actually need to be as good. And I think you can close potentially a lot more. That's my perspective. I haven't actually tested it by going on to another company, but I know that's been one of the really big differentiating factors I've seen from people who just take off a lot faster compared to the ones that, I mean, generally don't. But
Yeah.
yeah, I think the
Here's what's
reason,
interesting, though. Here's what's interesting. I'll tell you what I see like a little bit with that. So you're absolutely right that organic presences do make it significantly easier, and it's a good indication of a healthy company and a healthy offer. What I tend to find is that people who start in those types of ecosystems, they get so spoiled that they can't
yes,
transition and figure it out in systems where maybe that you got to be a little bit more like scrappy and build it up. So I almost would take the flip side approach. I like going in under supported companies, just getting smacked around for a little bit so I can learn it all. And then through that, now when you do end up at a company with a bigger organic presence, like you appreciate it for what it is in the first place. And I think a lot of reps who get into those environments, they start getting these huge close rates and everything. And they think it's all about them when really they're just like on the marketing team is outrageously good. And they're just taking orders on the back end. And then once they go from that and they go to a system that maybe needs a little bit more lead nurture or the leads are a little bit colder or the offer is not as hot, they just fall flat on their face. And then a lot of times what ends up happening is actually it messes with them mentally so deeply that they just can't get back. They almost like it takes them out of the game altogether.
Yeah. No, I've definitely seen that for sure. And I agree with you. I'm actually super grateful that I didn't hit it big early on. And I remember there's actually one coach I was talking with, and this was when so I went from an SDR to a closer role. We could talk about that later, but I was sucking really, really badly. And I remember him telling me, he's like, look, man, I'm actually really glad that you're not hitting it big. I was like, screw you. What do you mean? Right. And he was like, well, I've seen a lot of people, they hit it big when they're young. They think they've got it all figured out. They accumulate all this money and ultimately they didn't have the character traits or the beliefs necessary to hold on to that. And then they just screw themselves in the long term. And then, they're 25, they're 30 and they're restarting midlife crisis type of thing. And I don't want that to happen to you. And I was like, damn, And so ever since that time, pretty much the way that I measure my own progress hasn't necessarily been as much financial. It's more, how many lessons can I accumulate? Like, how much business acumen can I accumulate to where I just know how to run these orgs and I could truly parachute into any company. And this is my personal goal as a sales development professional, and just fix that whole department, turn it into a competitive advantage versus, well, whatever it was initially. And I think if people have that longer term mindset, like, it's funny, and I've heard you talk about this a little bit, but how do you become an authentic rainmaker to where when you step into a company, you make it rain because you have that skill set? And I think that's a long-term view that would benefit a lot of salespeople, a lot of SDRs, just in general, people coming into this space where it's rapid growth, do or die type of environment.
Anyone who's listening to this needs to just rewind and listen to that again, because that part is so massive. I can't even just yes, there's like a full body yes on that, because it's crazy the difference between, if you are playing this game to get money, you will give up and the money will escape you. If you play the game to get the knowledge, the lessons, the mastery, the money will follow you, and the thing that you build can never be taken away from you. Your money can always be taken away from you. Your skills, they can't take it away from you. Your experience, they can't take it away from you, right? So that's truly, if you look at like an asset or an investment, right? An investment is truly something that has safety of principle. Right. And this is off of Benjamin Graham, who Benjamin Graham was the mentor to Warren Buffett. And he wrote the book called Securities Analysis, right? Or The Intelligent Investor. And when you look at Ben Graham's statement, he's the godfather of value investing. He says, the difference between investing and speculation is safety of principle. And when what you're accumulating, the assets you're accumulating are experience, skills, and wisdom that's gained from those experience and applying the skills, that cannot be taken away. You have safety of principle. You will forever have a productive asset that will help you make money for the rest of your life, right? And that's why that mindset is so important. And it's very counterintuitive, because a lot of us, when we're on the outside looking in, we see these people traveling, we see the flash, we see people with money, we see high rises and sick views and nice cars and whatever, the thing that catches someone's attention. And then once we get into the world, if you pursue that, you don't really end up getting the joy of the experience either, right? Like the knowledge and and you use a word I really want to highlight, like business acumen.
Yep.
Like business. So what made you say, I want business acumen?
Well, I think that's just what a lot of representatives lack. I mean, especially in our space, like truly, there aren't that many actual professionals. And I think one of the really big shifts for myself is just understanding, hey, what actually is my professional mission? Like, why am I doing what I'm doing? Because it's not for money. Like genuinely, it couldn't be. Because if I just wanted money, even to live like a reasonably good lifestyle, you can get a regular 9 to 5. You really can. And I think a lot of people break into this industry because they hate the work. It's not even as much that they can't make the money they want. I mean, maybe if they have a family, but if you're a young guy like me, you can make reasonable money doing whatever. But there's a big difference between that and helping grow a company to like 500K a month, $1 million a month, 2 million a month. That feels good when you know that it was actually because of the things that you did, because you just failed so many times over several years. And then you finally, figure out those last little pieces that helps you grow to that next level. To me, that's just the most rewarding thing. And so I would say that's a lot of what it is. It's like, I really consider myself to be my own business. Like I am, well, actually in a B2B relationship with my company, but I started off 1099, but I always had that mindset. Like I'm a business. The client I work for is my client, right? That's just how I view it. And so everything that I do, it's not so much like, how much can I extract from them as far as resources, doing as little as possible. This is a client, like I'm a business. I have a reputation to maintain. How do I make sure that I actually deliver the highest and best possible service to them so that they don't go with another business? And I think that's really the mindset that I've adopted that just a lot of other people don't. They have no professional mission and they don't view themselves as really like a business where they're having a B2B relationship with their client and thinking with that kind of ownership over the results they produce.
How did you start to like acquire this mentality?
So I would just say that it's been through a lot of education. I reinvested most of what I earned over the last like basically 2 years in business. Honestly, up until maybe 2 months ago, I wasn't really netting anything. Like I pretty much reinvested about 70, $80,000 into education just because I knew I sucked. Like I literally just sucked. It was very much like pay to play. It was kind of like, hey, this is school, is how I really looked at it. And even now, I still kind of view it that way. It's like I'm literally just in school. And so I'm paying to like with my income, learn these lessons. And then now it's kind of getting to a point where it's like, okay, well, now I'm making so much income that it pays for school and the lifestyle I want. And so now it's more of like my profession. But that's really how I viewed it, is just how many lessons can I acquire? And if I can spend money to do it faster, then I didn't really hesitate to do that. Now I would say it's more of a game of how can I learn to think better than what education or knowledge am I missing? So it kind of shifts a little bit eventually, if that makes sense.
Yeah. And I think it shifts back too, right? Like you get really good at thinking better. And then after a while, then now you get to another level and now you need new skills to kind of keep going. And so you will go back and forth between those two. Like, how do I acquire the skills? And once I have the skills, how do I just start thinking smarter and being smarter? And then boom, you keep going back and forth between the two. And so with that, your goal has been, I want to acquire lessons. I want to develop my business acumen as much as possible. Now, what were one or two of the insights that you found particularly counterintuitive yet massively impactful for you?
So one of these was actually recently, and this is just one that has really stuck out to me because I never held this belief previously, but it truly is far better to give and value what you take in payment. It truly is. Some of the most stressful times that I've had inside of my org when I was first starting in management is when I felt like I was taking more in payment than what I was giving in value. Because that's when you're like, I don't even know if I'm going to be here long term. And so I think a lot of people are like, oh, how can I just make it even to where, I get paid what I feel like I'm worth? What's actually better to be below that, in my opinion, to where you give more. And it's the same thing as like any other business to business relationship. It's like if you were a company, no one's going to do business with you if you strike a fair deal. Like it needs to be disproportionately good for the client. And so that was one mindset that I would say really changed things up more so recently.
It's huge.
Yeah, but gosh, there's been so many. I honestly think though the most profound is just taking ownership over your results. I know I've said that like a few times, but genuinely, there's a lot of people who will just blame literally anyone else. And so it was funny. I was really trying to sort out how to become a great SDR. And I wasn't at this time. This was in my first year. I'd been with the org for about 5-6 months. I tried to move up to closer, was terrible, moved back down, and then I just had a new resolve to really master the appointment setting game. I would say that's where I adopted that lessons first mindset.
Oh, interesting.
And yeah, I would say that was a really big pivotal moment. But I was like, man, like what do I need to do to figure out this role to where I can actually get the results that I'm hearing a lot of other appointment setters have in the space, to where they're actually making like 5-6K a month. Like, why am I not there? Things like that. So ended up doing a lot of networking, and it's funny, I enrolled in this one coaching program and I ended up selling one of my spreadsheets because I was just really good at making these spreadsheets, but I sold this spreadsheet to this other really great SDR who's helping out with running an org. And I got a one-to-one coaching session with him for like 2 hours. So I was like, all right, I'm going to be able to ask him any questions I want. So we hopped on there. And I genuinely think the biggest lesson I took away from that was he was like, look, maybe like the company you're at isn't the best as far as being able to make the income you want, But before you leave, ask yourself this question first. What else could you possibly do inside of this organization to make it such that you can get the results you want? What else can you do? And that question, I think, would save so many reps from just bouncing from company to company. Because basically what the answer was to me was I was a closer. I was terrible. I was also getting horrible appointments though. So I was like, well, what potentially could I do to get better appointments, right? Like what could I do personally? And the answer at that point was, well, if the appointment setting team sucks, if I'm starting to figure this thing out, maybe there's a way where I could transfer my skill set to them and then roll over to the closer role. And so that's basically how this whole idea started. I was like, well, let's not just bounce because this is a great company. Believe in the vision. Culture's phenomenal. Love the CEO. Love the team. Culture's good. What can I do to make this work? And it was basically breaking into management. And so that was the move that I made. And it was just that rainmaker mindset. It's like, just figure out how to make it work within a given company. Like if everything else is lining up, there's really no reason not to. So I would say that question was probably like the biggest lesson that I still ask myself to this day. Like anytime I'm like, oh man, wouldn't it be easier if I was at another company with a bigger social presence or whatever it is, right? It's like, well, shoot, man, like what else could you do? And there's always an answer, almost always.
Yeah, and it's that mentality, right? The obstacle is the way, right? Like so when you're in those situations and you think, oh, well, the grass is probably greener somewhere else, really there's a lesson that you're supposed to be learning. And if you stick with it, you'll get that lesson. And that lesson's even more valuable than the money you would make at the other company, because that 100%. Lesson is the asset. Yeah, that's cool. So tell us one more potential insight or something that came up that what you found was counterintuitive in your like collecting of these lessons.
I would say a really big one was, and it's more specific to SDRs, but I was always super concerned about my show rate. And this is more just like a plug for the SDRs out there, but honestly, also the business owners who are looking at their show rate and they're like, well, damn, why is my show rate 60% or whatever when everywhere else people are telling me it's 80% and things like that. And a lot of this I actually learned once, you and I started talking a lot more and interacting more, but it was like, there's certain metrics that just don't matter. And I think a lot of closers, appointment setters, business owners don't actually focus on the metrics that matter. And I'm not saying show rate doesn't matter, all right? Like it does matter to a certain extent, but there have been months where I've had legitimately, and this wasn't even that long ago, like this was 2022, mid 2022, I'd have like a 40% show rate, but I would have like a 30% set to close and the median for the team was like 12%. Because I would just get into it so much with prospects that the ones that genuinely didn't want to buy, they would just literally not show up. But the ones that did were in. And I think that's just a really big thing. It's like, hey, the most important thing is that we make money. And so if you're making money, sometimes reps will be like, oh, well, my show rate, and then they'll try to start fixing something like that. Or maybe, I don't know, it's their answer rate or, how many such they get from the number of conversations they have. But at the end of the day, it's like, what is the bottom line? Are you ahead? Are you where you're supposed to be? Are you behind? And focus on, okay, what are the metrics that I need to dial in order to get the results that I want versus what are the metrics I need to dial in because my CEO said that this is important, or, this other coach said that I should focus on this from the perspective of a business owner. I think that is a huge thing that just so many people miss. And I missed, to be frank, until, you and I started talking more.
Yeah. And when you are optimizing for these sort of secondary or tertiary metrics that aren't necessarily the ones that matter, the problem that occurs is you find yourself on these wild goose chases where you and the whole team will lose a whole 2 months for trying to optimize for something that you shouldn't have even been optimizing for in the first place.
Yep.
Okay, so I know for you, obviously, education's been a massive thing, and one of the things that I think is unique about you is that you've made it a point to really try and learn from almost everybody that you can. So I know you haven't only worked with us here at Coaching Sales and Rainmaker, but you've also worked with Traffic and Funnels, you've worked with Cole Gordon, you've worked with David Melman, and like all these different people throughout the time frame. What I really would like to hear is, first, I guess, for a lot of people, they get to a point where, okay, I did that program, I don't need another program. What made you keep going and saying, hey, let me learn from this person, let me learn from the next person and the next one?
Well, I think I just always looked at who has the results that I want, and I would learn as much as I could from them. And that at the end of the day is really what it was. Just because I wasn't where I wanted to be. And for me, it was actually like unethical for me to not get the results I want. And it kind of comes back to, I mean, that's like a Grant Cardone principle, if you've ever read his 10X rule, anyone out there. But a lot of it just comes down to is like, I'm the business. I need to get the results. If I'm not getting the results, then I need to figure out how. It doesn't matter what my bottom line is. I've committed to providing the best possible service to this client. How do I do it? And if I don't know how, I need to find that answer. So that's where a lot of the hunger has come from and continues to come from, is I'm unwilling to be anything but the best in the space. Because otherwise I would feel like, hey, you should honestly fire me and you should hire this other person. Just like out of integrity, I would have to tell people that. And
Totally.
I don't want to tell people that. So I got to become the best. But no, like I've learned a ton from a ton of different people. Like anytime I can step in and get a new perspective from somebody, which I don't think is, anything new. I don't think everyone implements that, but it's super helpful. And I tend to subscribe to the belief that Alex Ramosi talks about, if you've ever watched any of his clips on YouTube, which is like a mentorship is really just a course, or maybe, one semester, if you could think of a school. Like nobody goes in and is like, all right, I'm just gonna, I don't know, go to this English class, and then that'll probably be enough to get my degree into philosophy. Like that would be the stupidest thing in the world. And so the mindset has just been, I want to become a great businessman. It makes literally no sense to go in, or even a great salesperson. It makes literally no sense to go and just purchase one course and then expect to come out like as best as you possibly could on the other end. Like truly, if you just want to be the best, it's a constant and never ending development that's taking place. And you're pretty much always learning. So if I'm lacking knowledge, I am finding where I can get it. Really, no matter who it's from. Like I invested a lot, but there was times where I was just asking random people, like my friends, family, like a cousin, just like, hey, what do you think of this? And so it's just the coachable mindset, I think, is all it is, really.
Yeah. Yeah, when I like that the idea of like, oh, well, if you read one chapter of a book, you didn't read the whole book, or if you took one course, you didn't really. And even then, think about it, like it's like, oh, I took one course on English, I know English. It's like, well, there's a lot more to this. Like, do you want to write screenplays? Do you want to write copy? Do you want to write poems? Do you want to write, what do you want to write novels? Is it a romance novel? Is it a science fiction novel? Because there's different things you have to do for each. And so once say you really want to master the English language, then there's a lot more to it, and it's figuring it out. So it's interesting to hear that perspective. I like that. I haven't heard that answer before. Now, one question that I have just is, what did you feel like? So through the process of, obviously you joined Rainmaker and started working with us about 10 months ago. What do you feel like in Rainmaker you've been able to get that maybe you weren't able to get in other places?
So the biggest thing that, well, there's a lot of things that Rainmaker helped me out with, to be honest, but I would say, I mean, as far as just personal finances, I had no game plan on that end. So that was a huge help. And I think it has to do with just the fact that I am super young, and just in general, I didn't have a ton of life experiences when I first joined up with you guys. I'd been an appointment setter for a little bit. Honestly, I was still figuring out that game, talking about potentially moving into management at that point, but it hadn't really happened yet, or even really started to happen. So pretty much like most of the progress I've made from that point, I do actually attribute to working with y'all in Rainmaker. From a personal finance perspective, I would say the biggest thing though is it taught me to stop thinking like a rep and start thinking like an actual business owner, and start to make more of that shift. And I honestly believe, like, if you want to go into management, like you truly do need to understand business. Like you really, really do. And so that was the knowledge I needed to have. And so that's basically what I got through you guys. I would say 85 to 90% of it I got through you guys.
Cool. And then with it, I bet you didn't realize when you signed up for Rainmaker that it was a lot more of a statistics training than you probably realized. But like the amount of time that we've spent together looking at data and like going, no, here's statistically how this actually works, and like explaining the fundamentals of statistics so you can actually start to leverage that stuff. Like that's one of those examples of what you're saying with business acumen and just like what it takes 100%. To be a good manager. I very rarely will meet sales managers who even leverage statistics at all in what they're doing, which is like flabbergasting to me, because how do you do anything if you don't have really good optics on your data? It's almost impossible to make a good decision.
Yeah,
it's really interesting. What were some of the like little aha moments that you've been able to collect, perhaps that you found helpful through the process of like us working together too?
I think one of the really big aha moments, and this is probably going to be helpful for any of you who are looking to maybe get promoted within your own organization. And that is, it's actually your responsibility to promote yourself, which is a little bit counterintuitive for some people, because they're like, well, shouldn't my CEO know how to ramp up a manager? The answer is they have no clue how. And so there's like, a lot of people don't know, but it took me about 3 tries to actually break into management. I went to lead SDR, got demoted. Lead SDR again, got demoted. Went into lead SDR actually a 3rd time, got demoted back. And then I finally broke into like full management, because I just started taking full responsibility for onboarding myself, really understanding, hey, this is why I'm doing the things I'm doing. So you can actually explain it to other people. A lot of you might remember from elementary school, you're going through your little math problem where you're like, teacher's like, hey, make sure you're showing your work, blah, blah, blah. That is actually basically what it is when you're moving into like a management role from the start. You don't have any, necessarily experience. So you got to be able to really show and explain like why you're doing all the different things you're doing. If for no other reason, just so that you know it's right, but so that you can actually justify that to the leaders above you, who literally have no time to understand a lot of the things that you're wanting to do. So you need to break it down. You need to be mapping out a game plan as far as how you're going to promote yourself. Like, what is the onboarding process? What are you going to do? Like, what are the possible things that could go wrong? Plan for those. And, that I would say was one of the biggest things that y'all helped me navigate, was first of all, recognizing I had to do that. But second, like, how do you even do that? Because it's not a simple thing to do.
Yeah, it's definitely, there's a lot of moving parts. There's a lot of competing agendas and whatnot. And one of the things too, I think like when you're first trying to make adjustments or trying to level up like this, and the business owners aren't necessarily giving you the time of day that you want in the process, it's really easy to feel like it's, oh, they don't like me, or it's something to do with me, right? And now that you've kind of gone through this, and especially I think you being able to go to Playa, go to meet the CEO, go to kind of be in that, you realize like this guy's just super busy. Like there's a lot on his plate. There's a lot of people that want his attention. There's a lot of competing priorities. So the responsibility is on me to make it as easy as possible for him to understand what's happening and why it's happening. At that point, then he just signs off and says, okay, cool, let's give it a go.
Yep. Yeah, for sure. Now it was interesting. Like I was sitting with him and I swear I could literally see the thoughts in his mind just like rolling around. He's just dialed like 100% of the time as far as thinking about things, mapping out, like we'll be like mid-conversation, but he has like 3 conversations going on in his mind pretty much at all times. And that's, as far as I know, basically the life of a CEO, just a lot you're thinking about. And so there truly is no time to understand, oh, okay, well, I got this whole organization to worry about. How could I help this SDR move up? Like it can't be the priority. The business would literally fail. And so it's nothing personal. It's just legitimately, there wouldn't be a business if they devoted that much time to helping you get moved up.
Yeah, it's orders of magnitude, and even for me, like I remember I had this hotel job, my first job out of college. I was working at as a bellman, and then they moved me to front desk, and the general manager of the hotel would come and he would never say anything to us. He would just kind of just be like very like Hey, and that's it. And I'm like, God, this guy's so cold. He's so removed. I don't like him. And blah 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 blah. And he would, if there's anything he had to tell us, he would never say it to our face. He'd tell it to our managers, and then our managers would come and tell us. And it was always a weird dynamic because it's like he just walked by me to tell my manager and then leaves. And then my manager just comes and tells me. So I know he just told my manager to tell me, but he just didn't directly address me. And I used to be like, that's so weird and cold and distant. But now being in his shoes, I understand. It's like, no, he doesn't have time for the follow-up questions. He doesn't have time for the pushback or the support or anything else that needs to happen at that point in time. So he has to delegate it to the managers in order for that hotel to have functioned properly. And if he wasn't doing that, it probably would have been chaos and really bad situation, just like you pointed out in your case. Yep. And I think that's something that, like, when you are starting to move from a front lines or an independent contributor into a manager level, it's something that I think starts to shift when you start to realize, like, holy crap, 8 hours in a day is really not a lot of time with all the stuff I got to get done and everything that everybody needs from me.
Yeah, 100%. This is actually something I was thinking about from earlier, but I do think it would help a lot of people out there. And that is, I would say more so once you're in a company and you're starting to get some traction and you have a little bit of head knowledge, like you know how to do the basic functions of your work. That question again, just like, why don't you actually have the results that you want? And what could you potentially do to actually get the results? I know I mentioned it earlier, but I just wanted to re-bring it up because I think there's so many reps out there that are just not asking themselves this question. Like, y'all don't know why you're not making the income you want. Like business owners, you guys just don't know why you don't have the level of business that you want. And truly, like, if you just took some time to actually sit down and think about it, even like 30 minutes, why don't I actually have the results I want? And then map out a plan as to how you could potentially get those results, even if it's hiring a mentor, things like that. Be like an absolute game changer. But I just was thinking of that as far as the last question you asked.
Yeah, and the interesting thing with that question too is I think there's almost a prerequisite to this question that you demonstrated earlier in the call, is that you mentioned really fundamentally the biggest insight or the biggest aha was, my results are my responsibility.
Yeah.
Like, this is all my fault. If I succeed or I fail, it's because of me, and that's it, right? I'm a business, therefore this comes and falls on me. And when you ask, then why am I not getting the results? Because I think a lot of reps are asking why I'm not getting the results, but their fingers just externally pointed. You know what I mean? It's because the marketing team sucks. It's because the business owner's not doing this. It's because the application. It's because that prospect's broke. It's because and they're pointing the finger externally. Versus what you're doing is you have that prerequisite of, like, what am I doing that's causing me to not get the results in that question? And then that's where you have the control and the sovereignty that comes from it, where a lot of people don't. They just blame circumstances, and then they offer hop until they offer hop their way out of the industry altogether.
Oh yeah, it's brutal.
Yeah.
There's this one question as well, and it's basically the same thing. But I was having a conversation with my CEO. I mean, not even that long ago, but things were just not going well with the SDR team. Like, things were trending downwards, and he basically just came to me. It's like, look, man, the SDR team is your responsibility. You own this department. You're not getting the number of appointments that need to be set. We're not getting the number of close sets we need. What are you going to do about it? Because we have to get somebody who can figure it out. I don't have the time to figure it out. No one else does. So it's like, what are you going to do about it? It's like a genuine question. And, if you have that mindset of just taking ownership of things, that can be one of the most empowering questions you ask yourself. Again, like, as long as you're inside of an org and you have some basic knowledge, you know how to do things like legitimately, you're 1099. If you truly think of yourself as a business, what are you going to do about it? It's no one else. No one else is coming to save you. And ultimately, I think, man, if you actually get the answers to those questions, a lot of reps, you're going to realize there's a lot more that you can do than you think. Truly.
Way more.
It's a lot more that you can do than what you think. And if you just take time to think about that, every day, every week, whatever, you are going to make some massive strides in your career pretty quick. It's
And
just
that's
a
the
matter of
rainmaker
thinking.
mindset, right? That's
The
the
rainmaker
rainmaker
mindset.
mindset. That's the rainmaker. It's that I'm in this org. I don't care if the sky is falling. Like, I will figure it out. Right?
Yep. How do I
can
make
do
it rain?
something. Yeah, I can do something here. If I need to write the ad, I'll write the ad. If I need to look at the media buying team and help them dial it in better, I'll do it. Like, whatever it takes, I will do. And that is that rainmaker mindset of like, you just don't blame. Like, when I was on offers, I kept getting objections. I wrote the post that they could send out as an email for follow-ups, or I put the post out that they could put in their Facebook group so that the founder would post it from their profile, and I would knock in 2-3 of those deals that were my follow-ups from that. Right. But it's just going the extra mile. And the founder's like, sick, dude. Now I don't have to write this piece of content for today, or now I got an extra piece of content and it's free. Like, that's epic for them. They're super happy. And then what you mentioned as well is like, I think one of the root causes, and you hit this really well, was people look to be paid fairly for the work that they're doing. I don't want to be paid fairly. I want to be paid unfairly. I want my clients to feel like they're ripping me off.
Yeah.
Right. I want them to get so much value for what they're paying me that they feel guilty and that they owe me favors. That's what I want them to feel.
Yep. Yeah. And if anyone's ever worked with Mike, like, he does that extremely well, to where, like, yeah, I mean, I definitely, for the record, feel indebted to Mike. Like, the investment I made even into Rainmaker compared to the value that I got is just like literally ridiculous. I mean, now I'm basically in a position where I'm teed up to be making, 150, 200, 300 Canadian dollars per year, which is about like 30% less for all of you American people out there compared to your dollar. But that's still like a game changer, like legitimately unlocking the lifestyle that I got into the industry to get. And it basically comes down to just that rainmaker mindset. And I think like that's just why that program is so powerful.
Yeah, it's a different level of thinking, right? And then it's more fun because now what's not fun is being in a situation where you're in effect. Right? Everything's happening to you and you're just in effect. Whereas now you're in a situation where you're the cause.
Yeah.
Right? You're happening to the thing. And then you see the results of the efforts. And there's nothing better than that. Like, the money is a happy byproduct. The actual results, in that, like, you becoming the cause and being able to transform businesses through your business acumen, that is the real magic. You know what I mean? And that's where the fun exists.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, it's a game changer. Like, it's really different to go from not looking forward to work because things are just happening to you, to where you have full control and, like, legitimately you just want to stay up till 12 a.m. and then get up early the next morning so you can keep mapping things and building things. It's just like a way better feeling.
Yeah,
for sure.
You're learning all the time. And there's this excitement of discovery when you do take control. Now you have a problem, so you have to find a solution. And so that, like, process of discovery, like, and you find that, like, like that feeling when you get that good idea, and you have something to test and you're excited and you see and it doesn't work out, and like the whole, like, there's a rap lyric I love from a rapper. His name's Wax. He says, "You got to feel the lowest lows to get the highest highs. Blow your nose, dry your eyes. It's an open road waiting, and it's time to drive." And I just love that because it's the idea of, like, when you take ownership, when it hurts more. But when it feels great, it feels even better, right? And so because you have that, and you mentioned this too early, like, it's grit, right? Because you're able to take that, you can take the lows, but because you can withstand those lows, you then get the highs. If you can't handle those low lows, you don't get the high highs, right? And that's why so many people just end up in the middle, and they end up stuck in the middle, which is hell to me. That's not where I'd ever want to be.
Yeah. I mean, I don't think anyone in the space got into this so that they could be in the middle. It's too much hard work for y'all to just stay in the middle. Most of you guys, if you're even like remotely successful in the space, like you put in some work for sure.
Yeah. It's the whole idea of like easy 30 grand a month is what gets a lot of people into here. And you know, like I say this all the time. I've said it a zillion times. You said it here. And really, if anyone's kind of been in this game long enough or is exploring this game, like this is just the facts. Like I got fired from my first closing job after 2-3 months. I was in timeshare. They cut me on the line. I couldn't close to save my life. I just didn't have the skills. I didn't have the acumen. I didn't know how to communicate with these difficult personalities. I was getting run over left and right. I just didn't understand. And then when I went and I started setting appointments for timeshare, that was when I really mastered it, because the cycles were shorter, the iterations were faster, and it was a little bit less of an ask. So I had more time to play, and like I could experiment a lot more. And then through that experimentation, it just put me out the other side to where I felt like, oh, you can't trick me anymore. Like there's nothing you can say that's going to knock me off guard or whatever. You know what I mean? I'm here. I can think on my feet. Like someone could get on a call, say whatever wild shit, and like, I'm good. I'll roll. We can do it, you know, and it's not going to affect me. And I know you have that too. And it's like, you know, have you ever seen that Jamie Foxx quote where he says, like selling door to door for 2 years is the equivalent of a 4-year college communications degree?
No, but I believe it.
Yeah. And I mean, like,
definitely believe it.
With being a setter or an SDR, I feel like that's the equivalent of like online door to door. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, 100%. And it's actually really funny. Like it's a legitimate thing. I mean, at least in our org, most of the closers that actually hit the ground running and are able to make the money they want, to where they have like the highest closing percentages, all of that, started off as SDRs. Like me personally, I honestly feel like I'm getting to a point where I've probably had more conversations with our prospective clients than maybe even our CEO. I'm not 100% on that, but like I have talked to thousands and thousands of people. And so I just know every single situation. Like for me, doing an appointment, setting up an appointment, I mean, like since I've been with the company, I think I've set just north of 1,000 appointments. I just know all the situations. And sometimes my discoveries are deeper than like a new closer coming onto the offer, just because I know how to navigate it so well. And in 15 minutes, I'll get more juice out of somebody than a closer will in like an hour or even at all.
Yeah.
It's a massive benefit, especially if you're just trying to figure out what an organization is. Like, wouldn't you rather get 1,000 reps inside of like 2 months, 3 months than, or even 6 months or whatever it is, versus you go in and then you have 10 shots to make it work. Like that sucks. That's so much pressure to me. I don't know.
Yeah.
I wouldn't want to do it.
And if you're an SDR and you get 1,000 shots, it's a lot lower risk for the business. So the consequences that you like if you're a closer and you take a lot of shots and you don't make it, like you cost someone a lot of money and that person fully hates you. Like that. Yeah, I promise you, if you're a closer and you burn 50 appointments for someone, that business owner hates you. Like it's just how they feel. They can't, because you just basically lit $50,000 to $100,000 on fire for them. So, but when you're an SDR, you have these iterations and the opportunity to have low risk experimentation. And that's massively valuable. Like just that alone, to have a low risk environment to experiment in, that's what's going to give you guys the opportunity to gather the lessons that you need to get to a place where you're moving into management or you're moving into a closer role and you're going to do so successfully. Sweet. Well, this has been an amazing conversation. Thank you, Matt. We're at about time. So I know there's probably a whole group of people here that will want to connect with you and learn a little bit more and just be able to chat, share war stories or whatever. So where can people find you on the internet if they want to connect with you?
Yeah, so I would say that if you're wanting to connect, likely Facebook actually would be the best place. I also have a LinkedIn. We can drop those in the description. I think I do
Cool.
have my URL though right here.
Yeah, and if you guys are listening,
Yeah.
you guys can find him. It's is your name spelled Matt or Matthew on Facebook?
Yeah, if you want to find me at Facebook, so it's facebook.com/Matt Sales Grit, all one word. So MATT sales, so sales grit, GRIT. And you guys will be able to find me there. Just send me a request, ping me, let me know why you're reaching out, kind of where you heard. And yeah, we could definitely chat there.
Cool. Sweet, man. Well, I've been super inspired by your growth. I think that you have been one of the people that it's been the most fun for me to work with, just because of you adopting the raw mindsets themselves. Like hearing you say this completely almost unprompted, like it's just now a part of who you are. These ideas of accumulating lessons, looking at yourself as a business, taking ownership on everything, like all those aspects of it. That is who you have to be able to have all the things that people respond to in the ads, like the ability to work remotely, make 300 grand, blah, 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 blah. Like it's the who you're being. That's why this stuff is happening. And so for anyone who's listening to this, I want you guys, if you're at all inspired by Matt's story, I want you guys to listen to this again, because that if you go through this a second time, you will catch the mindsets, you'll catch the beliefs, because fundamentally what Matt's doing and the results Matt's are getting, it starts at the belief level. It starts at the belief level and everything else is just emanating from that. So thank you, sir. This has been a blast. I can't wait to hear how people respond to this. So with that said, if you guys want to connect with him, find him on Facebook. And if you guys want to have any questions or anything like that, feel free to put them in the comments here below the show. So that way we can weave them into future episodes, or we can make sure we ask Matt and he can come back and get some answers for y'all.
100%. Yeah. Thanks so much for having me, Mike. Thank you, everyone, for giving us your time.
Sweet. Now go close some deals. Let's change some lives and let's make some money, baby.
All right. See you, Mike.